A little bit down. Yeah, that's good.
Great background.
It's beautiful. So what were you thinking for this? Just like, hey.
Well, these are the experiences for both of us being trans individuals. And not for like folks that I guess assume they know our experiences. It's like right from us.
So I'm gonna look at you, but the camera's right there.
Yeah, don't even like think the camera's here.
Right.
It's just me and you.
Just us.
Yeah, just
having
us.
a conversation.
I have been both a transgender person in classes and a transgender person teaching classes, and so I'm very aware of the effect that microaggressions, pronoun usage, name practices have on trans students, which is that trans students don't effectively learn in those classrooms.
GVSU has a problem. Many transgender students on campus do not feel safe in classrooms. This is not to say that this is an issue only for Grand Valley, but somewhat uniquely, GVSU deeply values diversity and inclusion.
Grand Valley is an institution that prides itself on its diversity in the Midwest and its inclusivity. It just makes me think of Grand Valley's mission, like educating students to shape their lives and their communities and stuff. If we don't educate the whole student, if we don't like acknowledge and validate the whole student, then we aren't living up to our mission, we aren't doing our job.
Frankly, I don't think trans students are getting equal access to education.
Really should go to class today, but this professor literally likes to misgender me every day, so.
You are inadvertently creating a hostile environment for a group of people.
If we don't validate students' identities, they're gonna find someplace that does. We don't wanna lose students. Especially with thinking of intersectional identities, like if we lose a trans person of color, like we lose a trans student, someone in the queer community, and we also lose a student of color.
If you're anxious and you can't get out of bed and you are afraid to go to class, you're gonna miss class. It's gonna affect your grades. Or if they go to class, they will just sit and passively try to be invisible in class and not get any attention, but then they don't ask for help from the professors when they need help. So there's many transgender students that are on academic probation, and a big part of that is because they are so anxious about going to class.
Professors not calling people by the names they prefer, or have explicitly told them like, please call me this, yet they'll accommodate nicknames for people like Alex for Alexander.
With me, it's more of assumptions because I have long hair and I present in a very feminine kind of way. Most of the time it's she, hers, or what about a girl in the class, and they'll point at me.
When we were in the classroom, he made a reference to something about all females or whatever. We only have like 3 males or something. And I was just like, 4? Like
4, yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of like he respected in that one way, but then I guess not actively thinking like, oh, well, it still kind of classified me as one of the females in the class.
It just kind of blows my mind what little disregard there is for people's identities. Not just, I'm not saying like for that in Grand Valley, but anywhere. Like if we misgender someone's pet, we're so quick to change and make it right, but when it's a human being, we don't do that. And I think that's a problem.
And someone just kind of says, you know, there he goes, and it's just kind of like, I can understand, but it doesn't make my soul hurt any less.
This stuff happens so much that even just trying to think of like single circumstances in which it actually happens is like, oh my God.
It kind of breaks your soul a little bit every time it happens. Unfortunately, after a while, you become just numb.
The amount of energy that it takes to be involved in these classrooms just have such a negative impact on just anxiety and depression in general. I have had many students that they come to me and it's just, we focus on just how to get them to class because the amount of anxiety of walking into that classroom, that's just overwhelming.
How much do you think that first day of class and like making that first impression on trans students matters?
A lot. Trans people look for these things. There are all kinds of social cues that trans people are paying attention to constantly to make sure that they're safe. One little thing going not well can really make a huge difference to that person because they're sensitized to that issue in ways that non-trans people aren't.
So things that people privileged take for granted, you know, transgender students have to focus on every single detail of you know, what happens in the classroom.
First, people need to understand how important this is.
Transgender and people who identify themselves as other gender on the Campus Climate Survey are the people who are most likely to experience the campus as being unwelcoming.
I had no idea that it was that dramatic and that sort of painful in this particular environment, because I think of, you know, GVSU as being so pro-inclusive and so many policies in place to help people, and even that being the case, that was just so much distress.
And I think that if we want students to stay here at Grand Valley and be as inclusive as we say we are,
these inclusive practices have to be in place.
So part of that is recognizing that there's a difference between the way that a person identifies their gender and the way that they present. And recognizing that the way that you read a person's gender is not necessarily the truth of their identity. Even if folks aren't out or out to you or presenting in a way that's visible to you that they're trans, transgender people are everywhere.
We just have to start conceptualizing the people who are here a little differently. That's all we need to do.
when you have an opportunity, like the professor gives you the opportunity to say what you want to be called, I think that's really important, and it can affect like to what degree you're gonna like be yourself in that class.
It's like a little party, and then when they use them, it's another party, and it's like, yes.
My heart just jumps for joy. It's just like, yes, this happens.
If you're gonna spend the time doing introductions anyway, I'd rather know, okay, everyone in this classroom, pronouns versus, oh, I wanna know something you ate weird over the summer. Pronouns are important because I'm probably gonna have to refer to that person at some time in the classroom. Like, oh, well, I agree with what he said about this topic, or I agree with what she said. That's more common than, oh yeah, you're the person that ate the sushi.
Every student in my class has a name tag that sits on their desk with their pronouns on it, with the name they use on it.
I'm not the only person in the class that I have to explicitly express my pronouns. Everyone's doing it, and it makes it more normalized.
We generally talk about the syllabus on the first day of class. What you put on the syllabus sends quite a big signal, right? It's not just about the assignments and the deadlines and the grading. You can put on the syllabus
a statement about inclusivity and the kind of classroom that they're hoping to create where everybody is respected.
In that can be something about your approach to gender identity expression, sexism, racism, etc. I generally put Grand Valley's non-discrimination statement on how you report bias incidents, right? Where the resources are that are available to you.
So anytime you're doing something in the class where it's like, oh, we're separating males and females, it gets kind of weird.
Often when we use male, female, man, woman, we are taking a shortcut that we don't really need to take, and that creates erasure. You know, I think anyone who teaches a curriculum needs to think about, is this curriculum making assumptions about gender? Is this curriculum exclusionary in some way? Those are things we need to start questioning.
One of the worst things that people can do is to ask just inappropriate questions. It is not appropriate to question students about their bodies, about their experience, about their names, about their pronouns. People are not actually all the sources of your knowledge, and their personal experience is their personal experience. I can make an inclusive classroom. I can make sure that my students are safe and that the environment is there for them to actually learn, because that safety is important for learning. That's all I need to know. Respect.
You say my birth name, and now I'm looking at somebody or like looking around like, not me, like don't do that.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're outed. And not only outed, but they are the object of attention now. And so just a simple thing at that, a cisgender person can go into a classroom, sit down, and a roll call say here that a transgender student has to be anxious about it and have to be like, did they get the right name? Didn't they? You know, how am I going to handle this? And so that's a huge deal.
I think people tend to mistake it as insulting. What it really is dangerous. You could accidentally out somebody in a way that could then put them in danger the minute they leave the classroom, right? You have to think about what kinds of bathrooms are students using. They're going to be walking out of your classroom into a gendered bathroom that might not match the pronoun you just used for them. These kinds of things follow trans people everywhere we go in ways that non-trans people don't tend to think about.
You know, a lot of the time we don't know when we've stepped on somebody's toes or when we've hurt them or offended them, because again, I think people really do come from a place of good intentions and wanting to have really inclusive, welcoming classrooms. The thing about mistakes is that we all make them, like 100% of us. And so the way that you recover from that is you acknowledge your mistake. It's better than pretending like it didn't happen, because then the person feels a bit like they're alone with it. So acknowledge the mistake, offering a sincere apology, and then move on.
Don't apologize profusely. Just make an active effort to do it correctly in the future.
It's important not to ask the person that you've misgendered to take care of you and make it all about your feelings and how bad you feel for having misgendered that person.
And it just draws extra attention to the fact that you messed up.
Try really, 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 really hard not to do it again. Because there's a limit to that. Like if you were constantly misgendering somebody, and this is somebody that you are hoping to have like a productive educational relationship with, you are not going to have a productive educational relationship with them because they're not going to trust you.
Do it. Use people's names and pronouns. It's not difficult at all. You know, someone was talking about what I had said in a discussion and referred to me as a she, and the professor very calmly said they pronouns.
And I expect people to use those names and pronouns.
And that was that, like the professor kind of stepping in and using their authority to help remind people that we are going to use people's correct pronouns.
Whether people think about it or not, they use gender neutral pronouns and things in their day-to-day lives.
I would be wary of doing it in such a way that suddenly the whole focus of the class is on the one person who's been misgendered, because that can feel pretty terrible. But on the other hand, you need to be careful about letting other people model that bad behavior and letting somebody be repeatedly misgendered. So it may sometimes be more appropriate to have conversations outside of class, or to ask the student who's been misgendered how they would like you to handle that in the future.
Like, if someone misgenders you, do you want me to correct them?
We always like to foster very much a culture of letting people lead. So whatever feels best to that student in the context of that classroom is going to be the right thing.
Fostering a trans-inclusive classroom is something that institutions are starting to emphasize now. And I think because of that, a lot of faculty feel like it's a new expectation or a new thing to be scared of. Trans people are not new. Trans people have been around a really long time. I feel too often people get intimidated by the topic, and it's really not intimidating.
And that, number one, this is about our community. This is about making sure that our students are getting the education that they deserve and are entitled to.
Unless we're doing these things, we are not actually educating those students. This should be a fundamental part of our mission as an institution that, is of higher education.
I'm done.
What if I told you that?
This scratches the surface. You know, it's your responsibility to go out and seek out things on your own.
It's gonna be our safety blanket, comfort.
That's pretty much what the pumpkin is.
That's all it's used for, actually.